The following podcast may include coarse language, graphic content, and politically and/or religiously sensitive material. Those of you who are offended by such content should fuck off. To learn more about Daemoneye Publishing and download free products, visit our website at daemoneye.net. That's DAEMONEYE.net. Hey there, internets. Welcome to the Daemoneye Podcast, the podcast where we discuss tabletop and electronic gaming, science, technology, sci-fi fantasy fiction, geek culture, and lists of things you really shouldn't put on a sandwich, such as car radios, issues of The Economist, uranium-235, live crayfish, orangina bottle caps, curare, American online CDs, jockstraps, osmium tetroxide, ferret bladders, witch's brew, extracts of Tim Curry, laudanum, ground cinder blocks, tennis rackets, yttrium-3 fluoride. You can feel free to stop me at any point here, Tyler.
The problem is, I think you've pretty much covered everything that you shouldn't put on a sandwich other than your family dog.
Yeah, times get pretty lean, though, and... All right, so anyways, today's this is podcast episode number 7, entitled Lovecraft, actually, whereas the moniker may suggest we discuss Lovecraftian fiction and elements of cosmicism, which was part of his, I hesitate to use the word philosophy, but kind of came up in his writing and inspired a whole lot of other writers. So first, let's get the pleasantries out of the way. Tyler, how have you been this week, or rather this month and a half, since it's been quite a while since we did this podcast?
Oh, I'm finally freaking done with with school for the summer. Now, if only I could get my computers working well enough to freaking write. My writing environment went flush and swirly, and with the system update for my OS, and I can't backstep to it because the update has completely replaced the original files online, so I can't find the original files.
Hence the reason, well, part of the reason the podcast was delayed. It's what's done is done, I suppose. At least we're back in action. As for me, I'm enjoying a typical San Francisco early summer, i.e. it's cloudy as hell and overcast and foggy and not altogether too cold. Not much to add beyond that, so I suppose we can just leap right into the topic of this week. Lovecraft. So, what is Love? Well, first of all, let's cover who was Lovecraft, which I'm sure many of our readers should at least have heard the name, or if not, be aware of him. I won't go delve too deeply into the man himself because there is an absolutely excellent documentary on free on YouTube called Fear of the Unknown, Lovecraft. It's absolutely brilliant. I suggest that right after this podcast, if you haven't already watched it and have any interest in the horror genre or Lovecraft in general, go ahead and take a listen. But that being said, Lovecraft was a pulp writer, I guess, born in 1890 and died 1937, and wrote a lot of was probably referred to in the day called weird fiction. He wasn't the greatest of writers, but his ideas and a lot of his figures, particularly Gold Uncle Cthulhu.
He was amazingly innovative.
Yeah.
It'd be the best way to put it. When you're reading his stuff, you never knew what the next page would bring.
That's pretty fair. Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Of course, again, he wasn't the best writer. He was prone to a very baroque and even for the time, antiquated way of writing. And he had certain personal views, which even for the times were considered a bit extreme. Let me put it this way. There's a very good chance that if he were alive now, he would be one of the minority political parties which everyone pretends they hate. Or actually does hate. I'm not sure how else I can put it.
Actually, if Lovecraft were alive right now, I don't think he'd belong to any political party, because that would require other people be in it, and he wasn't a very sociable person.
True, but he did form a lot of connections with other writers in his. I think that's not entirely true. He was very fond of forming cliques. In fact, his letters, which he wrote to many other pulp writers, some of which would go on to be very famous writers, including the creator of Conan the Barbarian, for example. What was his name? E. Howard or something like that?
Robert E. Howard.
Yeah, he was a correspondent of Lovecraft's, and as I was saying, his letters far exceed his writings, and
by several orders of magnitude. But that's just it. He wasn't a very personable person. But if he was alive today, he would be one of those people who essentially existed only behind his computer screen and interacted with people via YouTube comments.
Yes, and there'd be some quite controversial ones at that.
Oh yeah.
There's no denying
massive amounts of troll points.
Well, there's no denying that the man was could have been a genius, because when he started reading high literature when he was like 4 or 5 years old. He read Arabian Nights when he was like 3, I think, or something like that. But because of his upbringing, which was cloistered even by the standards of the time, he did not get a lot of formal schooling, and who knows? It's one of those who knows what he could have become situations. But what he did produce was some of the most truly horrifying, at least in conceptually, fiction ever.
He essentially invented most of the modern day literary tropes and trends. The vast majority of what we today consider the literary form comes from Lovecraft, which is an amazing thing when you actually stop and think about it. If you take a look at when he was writing for I think it was called Amazing Fiction magazine. Before
it was Weird Tales, actually.
Oh, Weird Tales, that was it. Before Lovecraft wrote, it was all extremely serialized. It was practically soap commercials that you would buy and read. And then Lovecraft started publishing his work, and after him, people started mimicking the way he wrote, which was contained stories that, instead of one leading into another, they just had a kind of overarching tangential trend.
He also developed a comprehensive mythos. He actually encouraged writers to share in his world and insert their own creations and populate it, with gods and figures from this Lovecraft mythos, which actually you could argue was ahead of his time. But I think one of the things he really did was take horror away from. Because up until him, for the most part, horror was more like what we would consider to be the Gothic scene. Not goths as in people who like wearing black clothes.
Yeah, it was all Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula and the Mummy. It was all about the creature feature, the horrible monster that's stalking you in the night,
or the crazed murderer, or or the weird whatever. He took it to a different scale, which is kind of the thing we've all been dancing right now, which is the idea of cosmicism. In his mythos, especially towards the latter part of his career, he envisioned a universe or multiverse where, nihilism is the idea that there is no meaning in anything we do. It's all just atoms in the void. It's pointless. Lovecraft took the position that no, there is a point. There might be a point to the universe, but human beings are completely irrelevant to it. We are tiny, insignificant little specks, and if we ever truly understood our place in the world or the horrors that lie beyond the stars, we would go mad for revelation. That was the point. The idea of, which was the real rebellious, I wouldn't say rebellious, but really the innovative part of it. This idea of cosmic horror. Even in the traditional Gothic, tropes, there was still God. There was, you could still use the cross against the vampire. With him, no, there is no God, or there are gods, but they are horrible, betentacled, slavering monstrosity or mindless forces which don't even know, which if they could even notice humanity's existence, or just wouldn't care.
A good comparison is that humanity is the anthill in the farm that's about to get plowed under to plant corn. The farmer with the plow doesn't give a flying fuck about humanity, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to get rolled over.
You always use the ant metaphor when you get into Lovecraft, Tyler. I mean, it's not an appropriate one, but it's... all right,
it's my go-to.
All right. So that's one part of it. There is another part of his work which was a little bit earlier, kind of. Well, you saw more of it in his earlier work, and you also saw a little bit more of it in his latter work as well, which I would say is kind of the Dreamlands mythos, where this is the stuff which was more inspired from his readings of Lord Dunsany, which wasn't exactly cosmic horror, more like dreamlike, whimsical and weird. So, that's another side of him that we don't see a lot of, that people don't read a lot about, but it's quite interesting too. It's not so much cosmic horror, although that's in the backdrop. It's more of this kind of strange, otherworldly weirdness. Yeah.
More of a cosmic tourist idea. Admittedly, what the tourist comes across is horrific by anybody's standards, but it's not horrific to be horrific. It's just you've come across something that from your point of view is an absolute abomination. But as far as said absolute abomination in this point of view is concerned, it's Thursday.
Mm-hmm, pretty much. And getting back to Dreamland, I mean, one of the best examples of his Dreamland cycles was Rudolph Carter, I believe it was. It's the Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadith. Again, that's kind of you might consider that kind of a lighter form of Lovecraft. His the other side, kind of the more fairy tale side. I just wanted to mention this because it's the side of Lovecraft I think we should look at. But that being said, his best fiction is in the cosmic horror genre. Cosmic horror, these ideas he kind of pushed forward, this kind of neo-nihilism, which was seized upon and used. It was, well, not as much. I mean, a lot of his contemporaries, like August Derleth, they kind of twisted a little bit to make it seem more like a traditional good versus evil, where, some fans don't like this, where they took the elder gods as being the good guys and the ancient ones being, the Cthulhu ones being the bad guys. And there's something to said for that. But, the point was he not only wrote these really weird and innovative stories, but he also encouraged other people to expand upon his ideas. He absolutely enjoyed it. And that's why...
He invented the concept of the shared universe and of the linked story structure. Basically, if you're anybody who's enjoying the Marvel movie universe, you gotta thank Lovecraft for the genesis of the idea of how to do it.
I'm not sure if he invented that, but he used it a lot when it wasn't used very often. Maybe he did, but I can't say for certain. So let's just, maybe he wasn't, but he definitely was one of the first, one of the more successful applications of this idea. I mean, the other example earlier would be Thieves' World, but anyway, I digress. So that's why I think that's part of the reason why we kind of still feel his influence. It's always been a subtle influence, though. It's always been kind of underneath the wave,
Underneath the surface, influencing the shapes that the waves up on top take. As you see this huge invisible mass that you can't see directly, but you can see it shift and move the water above it as it gets closer and closer to your small little boat.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Tyler. But anyway, like I said, his influence was felt first invisibly, but in more contemporary times, he's actually got a lot of prominence all of a sudden. I mean, it was on South Park, for example. Cthulhu was featured there. I mean, even back in the 80s, it was briefly brought up in the Ghostbusters episode, The Collect Call of Cthulhu. So he's finally gained some pop cultural recognition, but it's still kind of on the down low. Maybe that's because, his central ideas of cosmicism don't have a lot of mass appeal, but at the same time, it's kind of retained this strange kind of it's still
cult following.
Following. Yeah. So it's kind of strange that, even in his life, he was fairly obscure, and in a way he still is, but he has this strange grip on a lot of people at the same time that's only grown over the decades.
Lovecraft invented my absolute favorite website to go to just waste hours basically loading up on pure nightmare fuel.
What is that? Sorry?
There's this website, scpwiki.net.
Oh, yes, SCP. I've recently started reading that. I wouldn't say it's all Lovecraft. It's also partially inspired by the Indiana Jones scene with the boxes. But that's definitely. But let's talk about a lot of. So we talked about his themes. We talked about who he is and kind of what he did. Let's talk about his many influences. One of which, some of these are kind of obvious. Other ones are debatable. Whether or not they are really inspired by Lovecraft, are Lovecraft, or only Lovecraft forgiven idea of Lovecraft or cosmicism. First of which might surprise you, Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide. They are definitely themes of cosmicism in that series, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely, but it wasn't something that inspired Lovecraft. If anything, it was the other way around, considering how Douglas Adams wasn't born until after Lovecraft died.
Not inspired. Lovecraft was inspired by Lovecraft. Okay. I misspoke. Pardon me. Lovecraft was inspired by Lord Dunsany, who wrote a lot of really fantastical fairy tales. He was also highly inspired by Arabian Nights, and he was also inspired by a lot of books in his library, which kind of discussed, the 18th and 19th century and a lot of other things. His influences were both kind of pop cultural for the time and also classical. But again, I digress. So Douglas Adams, Lovecraftian, the idea is that Earth is kind of insignificant in the greater scheme. At first, there are hints that it might be, but, getting with these ideas of cosmicism is that, the ultimate answer, to the ultimate question, which is supposed to be on Earth, it's kind of meaningless in the end. So, and in the end, Earth is destroyed, supposedly, ostensibly, to make way for a hyperspace relay. So it's kind of the ants in the farmyard comparison. So that's an example. Other examples. Oh, here's one that's a little more obscure. Phantoms, the movie.
Oh, that was totally Lovecraft.
Absolutely.
That could have easily been written by him.
It was. I mean, it's a little more mundane in origin. If you watch the movie, and if you haven't, I strongly suggest you do. It's one of the most underrated horror films out there with a pretty good plot, and genuinely creepy at times. But still, it's very much Lovecraftian in its idea. Not so much the idea of cosmicism, but in the themes and in what the antagonist is, and the kind of the hidden darkness, the hidden gods of the world, you might say. Although you can debate that, but it also has a surprisingly strong, well, not strong, but it's a little more scientifically based. And that's another thing about Lovecraft, is that, which was actually, I think, a very good take on, sci-fi versus fantasy. In his universe, true science is what we would call magic. The idea being that, what we think of science, the laws of Isaac Newton or even quantum mechanics to a certain extent are localized to this little region in space. And the true physics are, in fact, what we call magic, imploring the elder beings and ancient ones, because they're the ones who control the laws of physics. Therefore, that's true, that was an interesting take. So anyway, that's an example. And any examples of Lovecraftian influence that you can come up with, Tyler? Or
influences on Lovecraft, or things that Lovecraft has influenced?
From now on, things that were influenced by Lovecraft. Excuse me if I misspeak again. I don't know why I keep doing that.
Okay, things inspired by Lovecraft. There's this movie that I often refer to as Cthulhu on a Cruise Ship, but for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it right now. It takes a slightly more whimsical aspect to it, because the main character, who basically just ends up getting caught up in it all, can't believe what the hell is going on, and that he's stuck in this bizarre situation. I wish I could remember the name of it.
I think I know the movie to which you're referring. It involves the weird worm-like creatures that ascend from, the depths of the sea or something.
That's the one. That's the one.
I mean, at the very end, it practically is Cthulhu pops out. It might as well be. I mean, there's no other. What else could it be? But
yeah.
Anyways, now an example which is more debatable. Stephen King. I mean, he has said that Lovecraft influenced him, and there's no denying that there are Lovecraftian themes to his works, but I wouldn't call his universe entirely Lovecraftian or examples, or really an example of cosmic horror per se.
Actually, what I would do is I would classify Stephen King's works into two categories: Lovecraftian and contemporary horror. Now, he has his contemporary monster flick kind of thing like Cujo, and then he has his definitely Lovecraft-inspired stuff like Carrie or Carrie or
The Mist. I think the Mist. I think is the best.
Oh yeah, that is undeniably Lovecraftian.
Yeah, but at the same time, he kind of it's more of a continuum. He does get into more of the dreamlands, weirdness and whimsy, and kind of the more magical side of Lovecraft's, which not so much horror, more like almost like mysticism. And in his world, humanity does. So, go on.
Speaking of, it's an older movie, but it's called Altered States. It's about a guy who's using scientist using sensory deprivation in medicine to try and explore the inner reaches of the human mind. And in so doing, he basically starts turning into this Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah, I know Altered States. I'm not sure how strong the Lovecraftian influence. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much. Again, his influence is like great Cthulhu. It stretches far and wide. Its tentacles everywhere. But he's more just an example of independent film weirdness.
What's the name of that movie that was recently rebooted that was basically a scene-by-scene ripoff of the original and not really worth watching the reboot, just to watch the original? Took place in the Antarctic. Monster that converted people into the monster itself.
Oh, the original one I'm referring to is The Thing, and John Carpenter more or less said, yes, this was inspired by one of Lovecraft's best stories, The Mountains of Madness. And of course, I can never pronounce his name, Guillermo del Toro.
Guillermo del
Toro, yes. He outright stated he was influenced by Lovecraft. Look at his monsters, and he outright wanted to do The Mountains of Madness. Of course, it was canceled, but there you go. All right, so let's go into some other examples. Let's go into video games here. Silent Hill.
I had one more movie I was going to pop up.
Go ahead. Yeah.
In the Mouth of Madness.
In the Mouth of Madness. Oh yeah, definitely. There are a lot of horror films which kind of draw influence from that. Yeah, although they tend to be a little pulpy. But to be fair, a lot of Lovecraft stuff was published in pulp magazines, so
So it fits.
Yeah, but we should also, I think we're not really talking about what makes it Lovecraftian. I mean, is it just the having monsters with tentacles, does that make it Lovecraftian, or is it the idea of cosmic evil or cosmic inhumanism?
I think it's the idea of this overarching backdrop of just not indirected malevolence, like it's practically radioactive evil. You touch it and you touch it, or you look too long into it, and it infects you and turns you into part of itself.
Well, to be fair, a lot of that actually didn't come up a lot in Lovecraftian's work. And a lot of the times, it wasn't that you were touched by it; you were already born that way. I mean, that's what made it horrible. Activism was a big influence. Of course, you could argue that was also kind of influenced by Lovecraft's views on race. But let's not go too
the guy was a massively racist asshole.
Yeah, that's the other thing we were dancing around here. He actually did get a little better later on. I mean, there was actually one story called Cool Air where he regarded a Spaniard as being a gentleman and a scholar, and there's actually a scene, or actually a part in one of his longer works, The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, where he actually referred to a couple of African Americans as being, very. It wasn't directly implied, but the way he described them in the story, they were actually decent people.
Yeah, towards the end of his life, his views started to moderate and become more, contemporary with reality. But for most of his writing career, he was not a very decent person when it came to race, even for his day, which was a very racist day. I mean,
back then race was a thing back there, yeah.
Oh, back then people or white people in New York didn't think Irishmen were human.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that race was a thing. It was like even the people who thought you should be nice to other races, oh, no, race is a thing. Some people are still better than other people. No, they aren't, of course, based off color of skin. That's crap, but that was a thing back then. And of course, you could attribute it.
Here's the thing, that whole, default racism where, Irishmen aren't considered human and yada, yada, yada. That was the base level. And even for his day, Lovecraft was considered to be racist by people who thought like that.
Exactly. I mean, not defending the guy, but his cloistered upbringing and
his grandfather, who was a total dickbag,
and his lack of social graces, and his stressful time in New York when he was with his wife before he got divorced was part of that. But anyways, we digress. it wasn't so much being tainted by cosmic horrors. That the idea is that you have this influence in your blood; it's already there. Spoiler alert: in Shadow of Innsmouth, the protagonist has the fishy blood in him. In Rats in the Wall, the protagonist has a cursed family line. That's a big thing. So it's not so much that that as much touch is just that that influence is already there. There's that. There's also the idea, of cosmic evil and that's kind of the cosmic evil I was getting at. Also the idea that there may be meaning, but we're just insignificant. So those two things, all right. That's a rather long and winding way of getting of two major Lovecraftian influences.
But we were trying to go into Lovecraft's influence in video games.
Yeah, well, and weird monsters with tentacles. I mean, it's kind of a superficial thing, but that's actually more of an important point than I think, because until then, monsters were still fundamentally human. The word Cthulhu, how you pronounce that, his contemporaries weren't sure how to pronounce it until finally someone wrote to him asking. He said, "You know what? This was supposed to be just an approximation of what the sound, what it's supposed to sound like. It's supposed to be like, and Cthulhu is just the closest thing a human can get to pronouncing correctly. This idea of something being so fundamentally alien, not conforming to natural laws, that was an important point of what his monsters were like. And that was also innovative. It wasn't just Frankenstein's monsters or vampires, which were fundamentally human, or even werewolves, which were fundamentally of Earth, or ghosts, which were fundamentally of Earth. No, he goes beyond that. So 3 major themes, this cosmic nihilism, the idea of humanity being insignificant, this ingrained horror, and this inhuman monster. So that's this alienation. That's the major 3 things.
The idea of being tainted and having to fight the thing that tainted you.
Yeah. So finally, let's get on to video games and gaming in general. So I was saying Silent Hill, definitely an example. I mean, Silent Hill 2 especially, where that gets the idea of this inherent horror, this inhuman influence being there, but not really caring whether you live or die, but you're just kind of this tiny little thing in a world you can't understand, as Yahtzee Crosher of Zero Punctuation likes to put it.
Parasite Eve.
Ooh, good one. That doesn't have the influence of humanity being or at least Earth being insignificant or of cosmic nihilism. It does have the kind of alienation or the inherent taint definitely being there, because in that video game, which was also based off a Japanese novel, mitochondria are the parasite, and since pretty much literally every eukaryote on Earth has them, that's definitely a problem.
Yeah, if you want to get more into the existential threat aspect of it, an argument could even be made that Mass Effect was heavily influenced by Lovecraft and their idea.
Oh no, it was. I mean, look at the Reapers.
Yeah,
just aesthetically. All right, and here's one which is has themes of it, but also subverts it a lot. The somewhat obscure role-playing game called Cult.
Oh, I remember that game. That was a freaky game to play.
Oh yes.
The idea of Cult is that every loony bin that has an insane asylum filled with people who are are delusional and don't even think that they're in an insane asylum, or think that there are unicorns walking around, or that they're being attacked by demons, that kind of stuff. Well, they're the ones who are actually seeing reality, and the world at large is being brainwashed into thinking that what we normally perceive as reality is actually reality. These people who somehow manage to escape from loony bins and go on and do weird ass shit out in the world, the reason they escape from loony bins is eventually they come to realize the wall that's keeping them inside doesn't really exist, and they walk through it.
It has kind of the weird themes, but how it's subverted is that in this, in Cult, humanity are the eldritch horrors.
And we've just been convinced via brainwashing that we're not.
Yeah, by outside forces, which looks scary, but humanity is the scariest. And if humanity ever realizes full potential, they would be Cthulhu on crack. They make Azathoth look like a whiny little bitch. That's the point. So that's why it kind of subverts this idea of cosmic nihilism or humanity's irrelevance. And alienation it has, but not humanity's irrelevance. Oh no, child. It takes the opposite view.
Oh yeah.
So, it's actually I would say it's actually more Gnostic than anything else.
Actually, if anything, I'd say it drastically magnifies the concept of being from a tainted heritage. The idea in this case being that all of humanity is in itself the taint.
All right, another one, Dead Space. Yes, Dead Space 3 and Dead Space 2 did go more towards the gore horror side of things, but Dead Space 1 and the initial concept was very much Lovecraftian.
Oh, and the animated movies they produced for the two animated movies they produced for Dead Space 1, those were pure Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is. It's this alienation. And here, the taint is actually a taint that spreads. It causes dead corpses to rise. And it does have it's mostly science fiction and not bad science fiction, but also has kind of a bit of a soft sci-fi / almost fantastical themes to it, especially towards the end, which aren't as good. But the first Dead Space was best. I mean, some people didn't like it. It was too gory, was too violent to be true horror in that sense, but I think it's actually, the first one at least wasn't that bad. And the second one was pretty good too. And definitely Lovecraftian towards the end, but in good ways and bad ways. So there's that. Another one, Deadly Premonition, otherwise known as the most controversial game, is it good or is it bad out there?
Honestly, I'm not familiar with that one. You'll have to tell me about it too.
Basically, it's a rather bizarre, Japanese game. It actually draws heavily from Twin Peaks, where you have this investigator in a small town looking at this weirdness which grows and grows and grows. I mean, it's definitely has these strange otherworldly threats. That's not necessarily Lovecraftian, but the monsters and the alienation and the taint aspect definitely come into play there. As I said, it's very controversial. Some people think it's like one of the best games out there. Other people think it's a miasma of trash because the graphics for the time are kind of substandard. It has a very strange plot, strange game mechanics. It's just, it's a unique beast. Some people, it's that's why I say it's controversial. Not in that it's content, but rather, is it the best thing ever, or is it just absolute trite? So which in itself, I think, is an accomplishment. So I think the people who say it's great have it more in the right.
The Evil Dead.
Evil Dead, yeah. That's more towards a gore flick, but, definitely have the...
essential irrelevance, where basically food for these extraplanar demons, where the dead eyes.
Yeah. But beyond that, I think it's more in the spectrum of classic horror because, most of the monsters are still just walking corpses and ghosts, really imaginative and scary ones.
I think the remake is more Lovecraftian than the originals.
Yeah, fair enough. That was a different way of going about it, though. I'd say it's only kind of Lovecraftian. Eternal Darkness, Sandy's Requiem. It basically is Lovecraft, only with only there actually is hope in it. And I actually kind of like that take of it. Mechanic. Yeah.
Our friend Samuel is obsessed with that game.
Oh yes. That is basically is Lovecraft. I mean, it centers around 4 inhuman monsters, which throughout the ages threaten each other or humanity in some nebulous but definite way, simply by their existence. Also, insanity caused by learning the truth. That's also very Lovecraftian. That idea of driven mad by the learning. The idea that ignorance is bliss, and knowing too much about the world. The fact of just how insignificant humanity is, or the truth of how the world works, drives you mad. That's also comes up in what was that? It was. That new video game that came out a couple years back. The name escapes me, but it's it's the game that's being made right now. The sci-fi version of it, Soma. Do you know which one I'm talking about, Tyler?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
I'm drawing a blank. No, you would know it if I mentioned it. There was the same company which made the video game Penumbra. I don't know why, for the love of me, I can't remember the name. It's you play Amnesia, the dark.
Yes, Amnesia.
Thank you, God. I forgot it appropriately enough. Amnesia. That's very much Lovecraftian. Inhuman forces you don't understand, insanity from view of it. Also Machine for Pigs, but that's a little more down to earth, believe it or not. As you can see, without much effort, we've gone over all these things which either by the creator's own admission were influenced by Lovecraft or
by just observation.
Yeah, it's observation. Even if they didn't know it, have Lovecraftian themes, which they may have used inadvertently, or used because unconsciously or they read about it somewhere. This just shows the influence of the man and his writings. Let's see. What else? Not exactly a video game, but we can probably move on to that thing, the Slender Man, and for that matter, creepypasta in general.
That's true.
Yeah,
there's a lot of small Lovecraft-based games that have been made a lot in recent years with development tools becoming more user-friendly. I mean, hell, there's even a Lovecraft and Minecraft mutant child out there. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, there are a few things on the internet which must be made a version of. Ponies and Minecraft. If there's something that exists, there's a pony and a Minecraft mod for it.
Well, I know there's a couple of really good Lovecraft mods for the original Fallout 3 game. They basically fill the wasteland with random encounters and stuff that are Lovecraftian creatures. Like, you can actually fight blobs of darkness during the nighttime hours that hunt you down.
You mean Shoggoths?
No, I mean blobs of darkness. The Hunter in the Dark.
Oh, yes, Hunter in the Dark. All right. So actually, let's take an opportunity to go into some of the creatures which Lovecraft inspired and the gods. So this is just a list of things, and maybe you'll recognize them, and they've been taken up. For example, Great Cthulhu is the biggest one, both literally and metaphorically. Well, not literally, that would be Azathoth. But anyways, he's featured in this story called Cthulhu. Doesn't come up much otherwise, but he's been kind of the icon for Lovecraft's work in general.
The Fishman from Innsmouth.
Sorry?
The Fishman from Innsmouth.
Oh yes, the Dagonians, not Dagonians. What are those called? The deep ones. Yes, the deep ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. There's practically every even semi-horror based game or game with horror elements or movie with horror, anything that's actually like it's supposed to be a horror mythos has some variation on the deep ones.
Other gods include Azathoth, the great Daemon Sultan at the center of the universe, being all inhumanly mindless. Not as much him, I guess. Nyarlathotep, though, the kind of trickster god, he's kind of unique in Lovecraftian fiction in that he actually had a personality and an intelligence.
And he's not he's not automatically hostile to humanity. He just, wants to play a joke.
Well, no, he actually is actively hostile. The other monsters in Lovecraft are inactively hostile. He actually goes out and gets humanity, which is kind of weird. I mean, he was kind of an oddball. I mean, in a way, he was just kind of he's kind of a trickster figure in Lovecraftian fiction, I would say. So he's not really an original Lovecraftian figure per se, but his obsession with humanity, because he actually goes down and purposely screws with humanity, kind of sets him apart from most other creatures. He goes around and purposely
screws people. That's the difference.
People, yeah, well, and humanity in general, yeah, true. But that was kind of an oddball thing. Other more iconic or more Lovecraftian, the Hounds of Tindalos, which I think were co-wrote with another author, which were a little more obscure, but it's still an interesting idea of a creature which actually pursues you through time. If you see it, it'll actually pursue you through time, and is a creature born of a universe which is where it's made of angles instead of a universe where it's descended from curves.
The black goat with 1,000 young.
Oh, yeah. That's another example. Oh, Shoggoths, I think, are probably the next most influential creature. These inhuman, kind of basically these living creatures of cancer, which can take any form they want. This constantly rolling mass of flesh, which is eyeballs, mouths. That's another one. Other creatures, gods. Let's see. I mean, there's literally a book full of creatures which he directly created or inspired or his contemporaries wrote about. I mean, you can spend quite a bit of time just learning about them, and they're great ideas for monsters in these books. I mean, just even if you don't play Call of Cthulhu, which is a role-playing game. Oh, we didn't mention that. Lovecraft also inspired one of the oldest and most popular role-playing games out there, Call of Cthulhu, which has been around for decades and still being played.
Yeah, I'm playing a board game version of it, Arkham Horror.
Oh, yeah, that's
this
new
upcoming
one,
Friday with a bunch of people. This Friday, I plan on playing it with my freaking mother, of all people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's been a renaissance in this recently, and you're seeing it more and more. So maybe his influence is finally creeping to the surface, as it were. But anyways, I would, if you even if you don't play Call of Cthulhu, just buy the Creature Compendium, because the ideas, these creatures, like one of my favorite ones, which I actually co-opted for a little forum role-playing game I did, was the idea that all of humanity has these parasites, these immaterial parasites that cling to us, which were brought here in ancient times. Unfortunately, I realized that connection, but the person who wrote this was actually many decades before that. But I know, but it's still an interesting idea that you have these creatures, and they're actually are parasites, not these weird body phaetons. But it's still a good idea that we have these ethereal parasites which have been with us since the beginning of time, and that getting rid of them gives you great psychic power, but it also gives you great madness. That was the kicker, that that these creatures may weaken us, but we fucking need them, because without them, humanity goes insane. Well, we're rambling here, but I was just saying that that Call of Cthulhu is a great source of ideas.
If we're just rambling, I'm going to recommend Atrocity Archives by Charles Stross.
Oh, very good one. Yeah, it's good.
If any of you are familiar with Dilbert, imagine Dilbert in the H.P. Lovecraft universe, and the office that he works in isn't like some publicity office or public management office or anything. No. He works in the office responsible for keeping these eldritch horrors from consuming the world, and he's failing.
All right. So, we could probably go on for hours and hours and hours about his influence. Let's, as the kind of the final topic here, let's discuss something. Well, maybe not the final, but one of the last ones. Let's discuss one thing. Why is this stuff so damn appealing if it basically preaches that humanity is irrelevant? There may be meaning, but it doesn't really matter to us, and there is an inherent taint in the world that we have to avoid at all costs, or we'll die in ignorance is bliss. Why? And it's why is his brand of horror so appealing? Why do people buy plushy Cthulhu dolls? I have one on my my bookshelf.
Oddly enough, I think it's because it gives us a sense of hope, of all things. Because if everything is already mega fucking doomed, any even small amount of progress in comparison to how fucking doomed the universe is becomes a drastic step forward.
It's an interesting idea, because I like Cthulhu Lovecraft universe where there is a glimmer of hope, or the idea is that these beings aren't necessarily hostile to us, just weird and inhuman. And while we probably will never make peace with them, we can at least fend them off or reach some sort of accommodation, or perhaps they are really the endpoint of evolution. Maybe they are the endpoint of evolution. That's a twist I like, is that these are inhuman monstrosities, but maybe it's what humanity is moving towards. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? That's an interpretation which I think is a nice twist, I think, on Lovecraft. So some would argue that goes against the pure idea of what Lovecraft's idea is, because a lot of his fans, or at least some of his fans, are pretty defensive of keeping Lovecraft's ideas, his philosophy, and his writings kind of pure. They don't like derivations of it. That's why people don't like August Derth's take on his work, where he kind of imagined, like I said, the elder gods, which are kind of these more human-like beings as being on the side of humanity and good, and all of the Cthulhu and his mates being bad. It's kind of black and white morality. But at the same time, I think it's worthwhile to kind of twist or play with the ideas of that Lovecraft's stories and Lovecraft's philosophy. He encouraged that. So, I don't think he would have a problem with it, even if he were still alive today.
No, I think you're right about that. There's on Channel Awesome, there's a show called Ask Lovecraft that's little YouTube video snippets of a guy who looks somewhat like H.P. Lovecraft, who assumes the persona of H.P. Lovecraft in the modern day, not like a modern day version of him, but if you were to take the original H.P. Lovecraft and freeze him for 40 years and then thaw him out, this would be this would be him today. That's the premise of the show. And he answers viewer questions. It gets pretty fucked up and, pretty funny real fast.
He must have done a lot of research to get the role right. that wouldn't be impossible. That's the interesting thing, because again, Lovecraft was He wasn't actually a very prolific fiction writer. For one thing, he wasn't very good at writing very long novels. He was good at short stories and novellas, especially. But his real writing, his longest and most interesting writing, was in his letters, and that is a good glimpse into the man's psyche. That's why we know so much about him even to this day. Because a lot of those people saved these letters. Remember, many decades ago, or even a century ago, letter writing was almost an art in itself. They would write these literally thousands or even tens of thousands of word-long letters, which were correspondences, which would go on and on about the person's day, musings, ideas. I mean, you could argue that that's one of the things we lost with the advent of the telephone and the computer, but that's what it is. But we still have these letters. I think they're a little harder to find than his books and writings, which, by the way, you can find a lot of them online for free. Let's see. Anything else? What's your favorite Lovecraftian story, Tyler, that was written by Lovecraft?
The Color Out of Space.
And why is that?
I like the idea of this cosmic accident that just massively fucks everybody up, and nobody can wrap their head around it except to know to avoid it. The idea that this great extrasolar civilization accidentally knocked over, on its way through our solar system, accidentally knocked over a coffee cup or something. It fell to Earth, and because we're such primitive little monkeys, we can't comprehend what coffee is. Somebody takes a swig out of it and goes completely apeshit and becomes like Murder Ape. Only in this case, it's not them taking a swig out of it, it's the coffee taking a swig out of us.
Yeah. Well, of course, I wouldn't say it's an accident per se as much as anything else is an accident, but the idea of this glimpse into the outer rims, where space and time are different, that was an idea that Lovecraft loved. Because he was very interested in scientific ideas. He was a voracious reader, as I said before, not just in classics, but also in science fiction. He wanted to become an astronomer, but because he didn't have a understanding of advanced mathematics, he could never be one. He was also interested in chemistry. But anyways, he loved this idea that, beyond the solar system, that the laws of physics tended to break down because it's outside this space-time curve. That gets into this idea of science and magic kind of being the same thing. It's that what we think of science is actually this local incidental phenomenon, and real science might as well be magic. But yeah, that's what the color is. And that's what I like about the story, is that it's fundamental in humanism. It's actually not described as an ethereal being or being of pure energy. It's described as sentient color and of a spectrum which, does not fall into any of the wavelengths. My favorite one, I think, is actually In the Mountains of Madness. It's one of his longer works, but I think it's one of the more interesting ones, and it goes into a lot of in-depth explanation. It goes into this. It kind of reads like an adventure novel. I think that's why I like it, with just this long, slow descent into this increasing horror of humanity's origin and this scientific race that predated humanity by so many years. Kind of a precursor race, but in this case, it didn't really have much to do with humanity whatsoever. It just died off, and this is the last remnants. And at the end, of course, spoiler alert, the scientists are the ones who end up being dissected by the creatures. Yeah. So that's probably my favorite one. What is your favorite Lovecraft-inspired work? Work that was obviously inspired by Lovecraft, but wasn't actually written by him, be it game, movie, or story.
We're back to the Atrocity Archives.
Ah.
Yeah, for the longest time, it was In the Mouth of Madness, the movie. But then I got the chance to read the first one in the Atrocity Archives, and I was laughing my ass off while scared shitless. That pretty much caught me.
Yeah, it's a little harder for me, but the first thing that comes to my mind, and that's usually the best choice, would be John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, that was a good one.
I mean, by that, I mean the original one, the one which didn't use CG, the one which used some of the best, Creature Workshop stuff out there. I mean, it's not just a scare, it's actually genuinely scary and tense. And it stands up even to this day. If you haven't seen The Thing and want to see a genuinely good horror flick that is absolutely actually good and definitely does have Lovecraftian themes of humanity threatened by something that is not necessarily directly hostile to humanity and this, which is fundamentally inhuman, go see John Carpenter's The Thing. That's one of his good works before he got all crappy and sequely. Okay, let's see. Wow, we've actually kind of run out of topics on Lovecraft here, and we're still about 8 minutes short of our hour target. So do you have anything you want to add, Tyler? I can't think of anything here.
Actually, I would like to add that Lovecraft doesn't exist only in the media that we've mentioned. This media, the stuff that we've mentioned is just the stuff that's popped into our heads off the top of our heads. There's so much Lovecraftian influence in modern day culture that we could literally sit here for hours going over it.
I believe I already said that.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that there can't be more. If this has given somebody out there a good idea for a short story or a video or something like that, do it. Put it out there.
Creepypasta, SCP. I mean, remember, Lovecraft in his heyday actively encouraged other writers to do this, and
And that was my point.
Yeah, and he also did a lot of ghostwriting for a lot of other people too. So that's another example of how subtly influential he was. Harry Houdini. Supposedly, he wrote a lot of stories about his adventure. His fake adventures. Lovecraft was one of his ghostwriters for Harry Houdini. Not a lot of people know this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's kind of our conclusion here, is that Lovecraft is, in more recent years, has gotten a lot of the recognition which he probably deserves. But at the same time, I think he's always going to be an outsider. Which was one of his earliest, but I think one of his best stories, The Outsider.
And there's even some Lovecraft-inspired influences in the Dead Stars game.
I never saw that, Tyler, he said sarcastically.
What, the sirens the sirens in the depths of space that telepathically cause people to commit mass suicide until they can get inside a star system? Or the infected, the pathological, quote-unquote, improvement that turns people into murderous cannibals in order to stay alive to feed the improvement? That didn't seem obvious at all.
The latter, I think, isn't really Lovecrafting because it has very much a human origin and a rationale. But the former, definitely, especially since you've sworn, I think, to the day you die, you know what sirens are, but you've sworn you never reveal what it is. Am I correct?
Yeah. Well, actually, then we get into the Necrawl.
Oh, yes.
Those things are, the Necrawl are an ancient. You can't even call it a civilization, but call it a technological and biological infestation in the universe that use the radio signals that that civilizations put out as a 1-800-come-eat-me sign. Mm-hmm. They just fall on these civilizations and consume them and turn them into spare parts to make more Necrawl. The only saving grace, basically the only reason that there are even still pockets of civilizations, is because once a new Necrawl infestation, a new Necrawl hive comes out in the solar system, it immediately becomes a competitor with the other nearby Necrawl hives. So they, essentially often end up so busy trying to eat each other that they can't get to the next civilization over to eat it. And in the game universe, in the Dead Stars universe, that's kind of the situation humanity is at. The Necrawl came and consumed the core human systems, and as a result of the supernovas that were used to basically burn out the infestation, the Necrawl that are still left surrounding human space just don't have enough get up and go to send another huge invasion force. They're too busy eating each other. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't stop them from sending out scouts.
Mm-hmm. Well, not just humanity, but also all the other races there. But I digress. So I think that pretty much brings us to the close of the podcast. I might as well put out a little announcement here that my novel, the sequel to the Lycanthrope Club Book 1, Book 2, should be coming out very soon. I'm just waiting for the damn artist to get back to me. And I also think the fantasy supplement for the Universal Decay system will be out very soon as well. Isn't that right, Tyler?
Hopefully by the end of summer. It all depends on whether or not I can get this damn writing environment working.
Yep, and so hopefully my book will be out sometime in early summer, and Tyler's will be out in maybe August, September, and I think that brings us all home. So this has been the
I would love to just transfer everything over to LibreOffice, except LibreOffice doesn't do the one freaking function I need, which is customizable text in text boxes.
That's too bad. As I was saying, I think that pretty much draws the podcast to a close. This has been the Daemoneye Podcast, Episode 7, Lovecraft, actually. I'm Tristan Eifler. I think I failed to mention that in the beginning, so I'll say it right now. I'm Tristan Eifler.
I'm J. Tyler Burrell.
And we shall catch you on the flip side. Yo!
Ia Cthulhu Fatagan.
Aye, aye!